Hello. I hope your week has been great. My week has been wonderful. Today I want to talk about something serious. What else is new? But no, I try to lighten up sometimes. I will find some more lightened subjects. But today it's very serious. I want to talk about Latin America, the future, and the legacy of its past. Today, South America is booming. Got investors investing in Brazil, Argentina, and now looks like it's catching up. Chile and Uruguay, you have people investing and building new industries down in South America, but the past continues to be an issue. Now you're going to say, well, you're an American. Look what happened. Yes, my government did support the military juntas in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And this is the point of where I'm going to start talking about. South America is booming today and culturally enriching the world today, but it went through a very painful process in likes that only Europe knows because of World War II. Robert Jackson, who was the lead prosecutor at Nuremberg, said, "Never again can civilization happen." Well, it's happened again. And not only just Latin America, but Africa. That's another story I'll talk another time, and Africa and the Middle East. But it's happened again. The story of Latin America in the last part of the 20th century was very tragic. After World War II, thousands of Nazis fled to South America and Central America. Leaders like Juan Perón basically hid their assets. And what was the result of that? They basically trained their military Nazi tactics and helped set up, which was basically concentration camps in many of those countries, such as Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. Basically, detention centers that killed and slaughtered thousands of people. Some say they were rebels, like MIR and Tumeleros, but not most of them were not those rebels. It's easy to place a name as a terrorist group, but not all of those people were terrorists. Most of them were just simple people just expressing some opposition to hardline policies that the governments were trying to impose. The juntas occurred at the height of the Cold War and just right after the Cuban Revolution, which, of course, made the U.S.'s involvement in Latin America is notorious. It goes all the way back to the 19th century, and Cuba has been usually at the heel of that. The Cuban Revolution only heightened the determination for those to keep Russia or Soviet influence out of Latin America. And that unfortunately led to partners, and wasn't just the United States. Certain elite European and Canadian and other Western elites also quietly gave their consent to what was going on in those countries as well, because they have their economic interests to protect. Take, for example, Chile, which I just finished reading a book called Before the Storm. The U.S. gave money to make sure that had a generally good up until the late 60s with the Frey administration, which was the administration before Allende. That there was issues over the price of copper, which is Chile's main export, and most Chileans obviously want control over that copper, and it became an issue. The Frey administration, from what I understood, got a lot of nationalization through. Then what happened? The Frey administration differed with the Allende because the Allende did not want to give compensation to the companies. Of course, that's not going to make those companies too happy. And of course, that put pressure on the United States. At that time was Nixon, who tightened the noose around Chile in the early 70s. how Allende came to power was legitimately he got elected, but not by a strong majority. It was like a razor thin majority, and then he could have easily been stopped at the Chilean Congress, as I understand. But what was considered the moderate parties, the Radical Party broke with another party and voted for Allende, and that put Allende over the top. And of course, from what I was reading in that book, Before the Storm, the U.S. Embassy was basically hounding all the political parties in Santiago at the time. Of course, that I'm sure when he got elected in the early 70s, Nixon and Kissinger vowed to make Chile howl. Well, and then of course they looked and found somebody who would go against the Constitution of Augusto Pinochet, who led a regime that was brutal beyond belief. And most Americans would not know who Augusto Pinochet was, but what happened was two Americans got caught up in the coup, Charles Holman and Frank Terluggi, which became a famous film with Sissy Spacek called Missing. It brought home to the American public American foreign policy that the U.S. government did not want the public to see, and it became a controversial film. People tried to ban the film, which is you can get on Amazon now. But if people should need to see that film, because that's what really happened in Chile in the early 70s. And not just Chile, it was Argentina, in which was a mess because there was a social tension boiled over. Juan Perón, who was exiled came home from Spain, died. His wife took over, I don't know how she became president. It was like nobody. And then the military took over to clean things up from the Peróns. Oh, by the way, it was Isabel Perón. Evita Perón passed away in the early 50s, but Isabel, I don't know how she became Argentine president. They were cleaning it up, but then again, like anything else, it went to the extreme, and many who probably adopted tactics from Nazis that were living in Argentina at the time, there were a lot of thousands of people disappeared, up to a million. Same thing happened in Paraguay and Uruguay. Now, beginning in the mid-80s, the funny thing is that Argentina wanted back the Falklands. Where it all started to fall apart for them was Argentina attacked the Falkland Islands, which was British territory. The irony being, it was like Argentina biting the hand that fed it, because the city of London and all the other financial elites were basically turning their back on what was going on in Argentina. But once Argentina attacked the Falklands, at the time Margaret Thatcher was prime minister, that was it for those regimes. Even though Jeane Kirkpatrick, the U.S. UN representative, supported them, that was it for that regime. Reagan tried to call them, they ignored Reagan, and then they got really arrogant. And so where the horrors were finally relieved after the Falklands War, and for that there was another victory for Britain in that Falklands War, was the end of that Nazi regime and the lifting of the terror regime in Argentina. And it began with the fall of the Argentine regime. The accounting began, and it's still going on. There was a 60 Minutes video on the horrors of the disappeared. We'll never know the true amount of what happened between the years of 1968 to about 1990 in South America. So, why am I doing this video, and what is the point of these issues? The point is that while we're enjoying these the point is it can happen again. And it can happen here in the United States as well. The brutality of those regimes were just... You have to understand how brutal those regimes were. Yes, it can happen here in the United States. We're getting very close to it. if Americans need to open their eyes. There will be a time where you wake up and when you just make a political joke or something and you get arrested and disappeared. It can happen here too, and it has probably happened. There has been political violence in the United States with the killing of civil rights workers. We need to remember what happened in Latin America because we're getting very close to seeing that repeated. Have a good day.